Welcome to Quit to Win, the show where we explore the moments people had to let go of destructive pattern, limiting identity, and the internal battle to rebuild their life with purpose and clarity. Today's guest is Judith Germain, award-winning leadership consultant, creator of the Maverick Leadership and the Human Leadership System, author of the Maverick Paradox, and host of the Global Top 1.5% podcast. Judith's turning point came not from one bad job, but from a pattern she could not unsee. The more senior she became in HR, the clearer the gap became between what organizations said they value and what they actually did. That gap became impossible to stay inside. Judith, it's a pleasure and honor to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judith. So, Judith, you saw the gap between what organizations said they value and what they actually did. And the more senior you became, the more visible it got. When did seeing the gap become something you could no longer walk around?
That's a great question. Because I think the first time you start seeing some of these things, you think it's the organization. So you don't think you just say, oh, that's this type of organization. So you change industry. And it's like, oh, maybe it's not industry. Maybe it's size of organization. Then you change the size. And I think there's a misalignment between what the organization says it wants and says what it is and what it actually rewards. And I just found that there's something about when you're a senior leader and you are an influential person, you have to be just aware of what that influence is doing. And I just didn't think that I wanted to stand up and do an induction, for example, and say, this is the things that we value. And I knew it wasn't because I'm doing the disciplinaries.
Yeah.
And senior leaders going, it's okay with this guy because we like this guy, so he can do what he likes. But this guy we don't like, so we need to get this guy.
Oh.
I mean, I worked in one organization because it became, I think when you're in HR, which I'm no longer in, but when I was in HR, there's like not a battle, but you really have to be objective and sitting in the middle of the managers and the employees. And I remember working somewhere where this senior manager came to me, the guy who was running everything, and he just said, I hate so-and-so, we need to get rid of him. We need to find a way to sack him. And I'm like, you can't just sack someone because you don't like them. And he said, I don't like. And I wouldn't allow it to happen. But then you get into my work life is harder because I've done the right thing and they don't want you to do the right thing. And after a while, you can't always do the fight. So you might as well be somewhere that's more healthy.
Oh, that was really a whole lot. And the fact that there's a whole lot of unwritten rules, that they just walk by and which wasn't comfortable. So you have to work across public, private, and third sectors for over 25 years. What is the most consistent form of leadership dishonesty you have witnessed? The one that damaged people the most quietly?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. Unfortunately, it isn't one, but maybe I'll give you one that is quiet, which is, and I'm not sure if it's intentional, but it is, you can't do any better anywhere else. And I think that is quietly damaging because quite often people make themselves small to fit into an organization because they believe that they can't go anywhere else. And that's not true.
You can't do anything better. That perception is really damaging. I'm just imagine what it would have been like more like being an organization. Instead of aspiring to be more, aspiring to do more, aspiring to only to kind of be perceiving that, they don't actually want to do more than what's expected, and which is really a whole lot out. So you created the concept of Maverick Leadership for willful, independent thinker, wholly differently. Were you always a Maverick? Or did the gap between that started actually, or did the gap between started an actual value created one?
I've defined Mavericks to mean a willfully independent people. And I was always a Maverick. But ironically, I didn't know it. So when I was writing my book, which is The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders, I started to look into what Mavericks are. And I recognized that you have socialized Mavericks, extreme Mavericks, and Maverick behaviorists, and they're the people that are Maverick in the workplace and conformists at home. And like most people, I thought of Mavericks as that troublesome talent or that Top Gun type person. This is before I was doing the work. And I couldn't see myself like that. I was like, well, I'm not like that. And then, so I never thought I was a Maverick. And then as I started to define it, and somebody who I knew very well said, you need to actually start coming out as a Maverick because you're a Maverick. And it just I just sort of went, oh my gosh. And it was really funny. And I think it's because, and that's part of the definition going, what are the socialized Mavericks, which are quite different? Like Barack Obama's a socialized Maverick, for example.
Yeah, amazing. Maverick, the willful, independent thinker. Yeah, who leads differently. Yeah, it's really amazing. So you left and built something entirely your what did that transition require of you? That staying in corporates never would have handed you.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because the realization had me acting out for about 3 weeks. It's almost like the whole body experience just readjusting. And then I think it was similar to what people say when they've read my book. It made me realize why it was a struggle to fit in. So what tends to happen is Mavericks are hired in organizations because they can solve problems really quickly. They're very good at, especially socialized Mavericks, very good at pointing out, looking at all the dots and see the connections across departments. So they come in to fix a particular problem. They're given a lot of autonomy and a lot of reach, and then they fix the problem really, really quickly. And then the organization tends to pull back all the autonomy that they've given them because other departments start complaining, saying marketing is like, why is HR in marketing, or why is this happening? Because the Maverick doesn't see any boundary because everything leads back to the same problem. But then when it gets pulled back in, the Maverick is without the very thing that made them valuable, which is the ability to see the knowledge across it and put it together. And then they end up leaving. And I explained why after like for me, for example, I was a very good internal consultant, wasn't very good at business as usual, because once I'd fixed the problem and butted it in and trained the people and the rest of it, I wanted to do the next thing.
Yeah.
And certainly in that time, organizations they only have a certain time they can hold that energy. And I'm not the only person like that.
Yes.
But ironically now, following COVID, and we have to navigate complexity, that very skill is so sought after. It's kind of funny, actually, that now I'm not in organizations in the very time where they would have wanted me in the organizations.
Amazing. Oh, it's amazing. Just being more like looking forward to the next thing to get to face, and the fact that, yeah, it's really amazing now. So your human leadership system explain now why good leaders struggles even when they are doing everything right. What is the system level problem most leaders are blaming themselves for?
You are very good with your questions. So the human leadership system is a diagnostic model that I brought up that looks at the human and how they interact with the system. And the idea is that the normal state of the system, and that's individual and the environment, is one like a store. So it's always distorted. It's its natural state. And the leader itself role is to reset and recalibrate. So those huge waves become small waves, so we can reset in real time. And it's supported by 5 anchors: authority, alignment, ownership, standards, and capacity. So to answer your question, the one that is felt the most often is alignment. So people will say that's the first one. It's normally felt there's a misalignment, but the first anchor that normally gets triggered is authority. So you'll see the leaders will suddenly pull all control up to themselves. So you might see it as micromanagement. And what you need to do then is reset or recalibrate that anchor. So that's what I would say in terms of system.
Yeah, already alignment reset. Amazing, owing to the fact that micromanaging have to deal with the fact that, yeah, the top head is holding all the authority without actually giving leverage to those who have needs. Yeah, it's a lot. So we have helped leaders restore effective leadership when the old way stop working. What is the hardest part of the restoration, and what does a leader have to be willing to quit before it can begin?
Okay. The hardest part for most people is learning how to respond rather than react to things. And the reaction is an emotional reaction, and responding is objective. So when I'm working with organizations or leaders, one of the things that we're focused on is how to lead under pressure so that you can respond rather than react. And a key part of that is recognizing and diagnosing the signals that you see. So I'm teaching people to rather than say, my manager is a micromanager and he hates me, and then you have all this emotional stuff, is the signal that I see is the authority anchor is out of whack. That means I need to respond in this way. which is, that sort of like resetting boundaries, holding control, that kind of thing. And it takes all the emotion out. So this is not about being unemotional, because we are human, but use emotion for the right thing. It shouldn't be in a decision-making process. The emotion shouldn't be in a diagnostic process. How you deal with it after you've done the diagnosis can be emotional, i.e. you can be passionate about something or whatever, but not when you're making a decision, because you need to be clear-headed. So what I'm doing is helping people to reset in the moment, or if it's become deeply embedded, recalibrate in real time on real challenges. And I think that's what's making the difference, because people are now going, what's the signal that I'm seeing now, as opposed to, why do you stop me from doing X, Y, and Z? I'm going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, amazing. I think this is really lovely. Now having more like a data that they can use to analyze what those signal is, so that they can decide how to respond, other than just reacting from without even having correct judgment of what those particular signal actually means. Yeah, it's really amazing. So you talk about core leadership identity, knowing who you are as a leader, or your foundation. What happens to a leader who has never defined that, and what does pressure reveal when it is absent?
Okay. I think leaders that first start off, you can get by. So younger, when I say younger, don't mean by age, but more new managers, can get by with expertise and knowledge. But the more senior you become, the real problems you end up having is things around influence. So how do I get my peers to do this? How do I get this supplier to do this, or this stakeholder to do this? So the issues become more systemic. Influence and stakeholder leadership becomes bigger. Now, you can't do that if you don't know what you stand for. You don't know what your proposition is. So for me, I look at it in three ways. Like, what is your leadership proposition? What are you here to do as a leader? Because that's what's going to align people and buy into you. What kind of processes do you have? So for me, my process is strategize, innovate, and execute. And I do that when I'm at home or whatever. That's just what I do. But I understand it. So I understand that that's what I'm going to do. And that enables me to narrate the story of, let's do this. And I'll go through the strategize, innovate, and execute. That's how I work. And then you need to look at your leadership impact. So how are you impacting people? And how does that relate to the proposition? And then the final part is around your leadership talent. So mine, sounds a bit weird, is seeing truth. But what that really means is that I am hyper insightful and I see the problem and the solution almost at the same time. But knowing that and having all that integrated enables me to be more confident. It enables people to follow me. I can be more influential because I see my value and I know how to align people to what I want. I've learned how to narrate the story of the intervention that we want to do.
Yeah, this is really amazing. And the part that, leadership training alone does not take you this far. I think there's a whole lot of level track record that need to be built along the way for you to be able to kind of perceive who you are as a leader, go into this particular feedback and having those training that actually strengthens you. Yeah, it's really amazing. And thank you so much for sharing. So you support neurodiverse leaders navigating systems that were not designed for them. What does that work teach you about how much conventional leaders culture cause people who think differently?
Again, that's a great question. The thing with leaders, right? I see leadership as a dance, right? So, if you can think of an old-fashioned dance, right? You would have the man comes up to the woman and she changes how she dances depending on how the man's dancing, because he's leading. She's following his lead, right? Now, leaders, we need to be not the man saying, I have my one dance, you all change to me. We need to be like the woman and say, what's your dance? And I'll dance with you. And that's one of the things that leaders don't do. We kind of choose to have one dominant style and expect everybody to fit that style. That's not the job of leadership. Our job of leadership is to help and guide others to be the best that they can be. And we can only do that if we follow their lead. Now, neurodiverse individuals, brains are wired differently. They see things in a different way. And a good leader would want the best from everybody. So we need to start thinking about how to be more neuro-inclusive with others to ensure that we get the best, because like autistic people with ADHD, dyslexic people, because their brain is wired in a different way, they bring such amazing stuff, whether it's pattern recognition, hyper creativity, massive focus, whatever it happens to be, that we all need. So we shouldn't be cutting that off because we don't want to make some minor adjustment. And often it's not a big thing. It could be as small as allowing someone to have noise cancelling headphones on.
Yeah.
It's not going to cost the company much. It's not a big deal, other than the fact people don't like the idea. A neurotypical person might not like somebody else with headphones on, but that's not a good reason to stop someone from actually being able to perform well. I just think that if we don't bring in neuro-inclusive stuff, then as leaders, we aren't leaders, because it's ridiculous. And the number of people who are neurodiverse is very high. It's a much higher proportion than people realize.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. So your podcast is ranked top 1.5% globally. What made you build the platform other than just consult? And what does the platform give you that boardroom could never?
Yeah, great questions. I tell you what it gives me is one of the reasons the key reason I set it up was because I realized back in 2017, I wasn't having enough good conversations with Maverick thinkers, right? So I felt like, a bit stunted. So the people that come on the podcast are very eclectic. So I'd say the podcast is for the pathologically curious, which is also stars Mavericks are pathologically curious. Tell me something new. So people that's been on the podcast have been millionaires. I've had spies on there. I've had authors and consultants, all sorts of interesting people. And what they bring is the ability to see the world in a completely different way, an ability to make you go, I thought coaching was all about this. Now I realize actually it's all about that. So it's the conversations that you don't get elsewhere. And that's what you can get that the boardroom doesn't get, because most companies, at least until they start working with somebody, have tended to hire the board, which is exactly like everybody else. So there's less diversity, and there's a more dominant view. And I think those that come on the podcast are willing to shake up what is taken as standard. Don't always see that in the boardroom, where somebody goes, oh, yeah, this industry does this, but so what? That industry does that. That stuff is actually better in this industry, rather than go, I don't know, we only want to. So financial services is a good example. They only want to work with people who've worked in financial services. But then if you think of all the scandals and stuff that's happened, like Lehman Brothers and all that sort of stuff, it probably might be good to have people who didn't work in that industry working there.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Having people to just share their heart on. Yeah, I think it makes you see this differently, just the way you said, or into the whole lot of different conversations that goes on. Really amazing. So for senior leaders right now who can see the gap between what the organization sees and what it does, but it's not yet sure what to do about it. What is the first honest move?
So let me just get this right. So they sense that there's a gap, but they don't know what it is. Is that the question? They could take a free diagnostic that I have, which will help do that, if I can say what that is. You could find it at maverickparadox.co.uk/leadership-influence-diagnostic. But if you don't want to do that, I would say look at the 5 anchors, which again is what I said, is authority, alignment, ownership, standards, and capacity. And look at your organization from that perspective and say, which one of those 5 are out of whack? Which is one of those? And quite often it'll be more than one. But once you start looking at to saying which anchor isn't right, then the answer becomes clearer as to what to do.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to know more about what that is, they can just go to my website. There's lots of articles and stuff on the human leadership system.
Yeah, amazing. Which of the anchor is not clear? Authority, alignment, ownership, standard, and capacity. From there, you know what and where to treat. Yeah, amazing. So you say influence is not the same as being loud. What is real influence? What does a leader have to quit doing before they could build it?
Okay, so I define influence to mean calibrated motion.
Calibrated emotion.
And when people are loud, they are noisy, they attract attention, right? They become visible. Doesn't mean anyone's going to move or do anything. All right. So when I look at influence, I think there are 4 drivers of influence: capability, which is 8 subsets; decisiveness, which is 5. And then you've got power and impact. And what you need to be influential, you need all 4 of those to be working well. And impact looks at inside an organisation and external to an organisation. And once you know the 4 drivers and how to improve those, then you will become more influential. So with my work, I believe it's really easy for anybody to just give you a lot of theory. But I think what matters is if it's practical. So yes, like behind my system, there's a lot of theory, but I've translated them into practical use so that if you want to be more influential, these are the things you need to do. I'm not going to tell you about power poses and all that sort of stuff is useful for building confidence and such like. But if you're an organization and you need to be more influential with your stakeholders, these are the 4 things you need to think about.
Influence is calibrated emotion and having those particular core capability, decisiveness, power, and impact. Just keep on to how your influence will affect. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So lastly, for Maverick thinker who have spent years feeling like they don't fit the system, what do you want them to hear?
Why do you want to fit the system? That's got to be the first question, because if I've met lots of socialized Mavericks who have become very small because it's easier, because it can be really hard to be that person who's able to see something's going to happen 3 months minimum out. Because everybody else is like, what are you on about? It's because you've seen all the different because you're well connected and you across lots of different functions, and you're very good at pattern recognition. You can go, right, this is what's going to happen, and no one believes you. The fact that you can stand out and say, the emperor is naked. It's not like he's not got any clothes on. He's walking around, no clothes on. And a Maverick will say, and that can be really hard. It can be really lonely. So the questions that goes back to the identity, know who you are, know what your boundaries are. And also think about what is it that you are objecting to, because you don't always have to loudly object to things. And if you don't mind me saying, a lot of people that I've known, Mavericks or otherwise, have said my book, The Maverick Paradox, Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders, is helpful in that manner, because it looks at different types of Mavericks. It looks at a different way, Maverick Leadership, different way of leading. It looks at power as well, like how does power work? And that kind of dynamic can make a huge difference.
Yeah, amazing. The emperor is naked. Oh, I think he's having more like a standard which you want to portray. Yeah, knowing when to turn. This is really amazing. And once again, thank you for sharing your heart with us on this particular topic. So from our audience who would love to connect with you or take out those various tests to view the organization differently. And for those who want to reach out for coaching, how can they reach out and where is the best platform?
They can reach out to me via the website, maverickparadox.co.uk. They can follow me on LinkedIn, which is Judith Germain, Germa.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judith. Thank you for remembering us that leadership is not just about individual capability, but about understanding the system people lead within, and that integrity means refusing to pretend the gap does not exist. It's one this audience is needed to actually more like close with. My audience will love to reach out. Check the show notes. You see the link to actually reach out to Judith. Yeah, remember that the strongest leadership do not just lead. They understand the people. They understand the system people lead within. Once again, it's really a pleasure and honor.
Thank you very much.